All right, welcome everybody. This is TRiRODS for February 2025. We have met our self-imposed milestone of Metalnx 3.0 earlier this week. And Justin is going to talk about all the great things that are in it, including what's not in it. Justin, take it away.
Okay, hi, I'm Justin James. I'm an application engineer for the iRODS Consortium. And as Cheryl said, I'm talking about Metalnx 3.0.0. These slides, if you're interested, can be found on slides.com/iRODS. Okay, so first I'll get into what Metalnx is and what we've changed in this release of Metalnx. Metalnx is a Java-based web GUI for iRODS. And we just released 3.0 this week, yesterday, in fact. And so the main changes we have, the biggest change is that we removed the Metalnx database. It was its own separate Postgres database that ran on the server where Metalnx ran. And along with removing the database, that meant we removed some things that were only stored in the database, such as favorites, templates, shared links, and user profiles. And other user fields that were only in that database. The other big change was that we added support for the 10-level permission model that was introduced in iRODS 4.3. Okay, so new user form changes. One of the changes, and this came from an issue someone wrote, the default when you added a new user, the drop-down list defaulted to RODS admin, and it made sense to everyone to default that to RODS user. So that is now the default. We also removed, there was a personal information section within that new user form, and we removed that because all of that was information that was stored in the Metalnx database. Finally, we removed group assignments at user creation time, so it's not in the new user form anymore. If you want to assign that user to groups, you'll need to create the user and then go to the groups page and assign the groups to that user. Another change was that there's a left sidebar that you'll see in the next couple slides in Metalnx, and we added a configuration option to hide that left sidebar in case people don't want to see that. But that is being shown by default, so that there's no change with the default behavior for that one. We also there's a public link that has always been on the left sidebar. We added a configuration option to hide that public link. And that is the actual default. So if you want people to have the public link, you'll have to enable that. Finally, we updated some library dependencies and did some bug fixes. Okay, so the Metalnx database, here's a kind of a listing or a visual of what was in the Metalnx database, all the tables that were in it. I'm not going to go through all that, and this isn't a complete list of all the columns for each table. But just to point out that it had some user information, it had information about bookmarks and favorites, and also metadata templates. So those will all be removed because we're removing this database. Okay, so the rationale for removing the database, we really just wanted a generic stateless iRODS GUI. We didn't want people by default to get all this extra stuff that's not a part of iRODS. We wanted just a GUI that just did iRODS things. And this also simplified the code and made it more maintainable. The big thing is we wanted a single source of truth. With the Metalnx database, you had two sources of truth, and those could get out of sync. It required jobs to run to keep those in sync, and that was buggy. Finally, some of the features that we have been removed, we feel like can be re-implemented using things that are in the iRODS database. For example, information about first and last name on the user can be stored in metadata within iRODS. So those can be added back in later without having this separate external database. Okay, so I just have some graphs to show or images to show what it looked like and what it looks like now. So the temp level permission model on the left, you see this was the 4.2 to X permission model, where you only had four levels. And on the right, you see a 10 level permission model. And we fully support the 10 level permission model. Now the left picture, while it says before 3.0, that is correct, but it's also what it would look like if you were connecting 3.0.0 to a 4.2x iRODS server. So it is this new Metalnx is backward compatible with 4.2x. The left sidebar changes, you'll see on the left, there are a lot of things that have been deleted, and so it's a smaller list. What you see on the right, by the way, is for a RODS admin. Users groups, those would not, resources, those would not be available for a RODS user. So RODS user would have a very short list now. So if you compare these two, um, the public is missing. That's because you can still have the public with the new 3.0.0, but it's defaulted to being disabled. So that's the reason it's gone. Favorites, shared links, and templates are gone. Okay, so if you want to enable the public collection on that left sidebar, all you have to do is update Etsy iRODS X Metalnx.properties on your server and set the sidebar show public to true. That is defaulting to off. That is in the Metalnx.properties at the very bottom of it, so you don't have to add this in. Just update that value to true. Okay. New user form, like I said, things like first name, last name, and email address are no longer applicable because they were stored in the Metalnx database. So that part has been deleted. And again, we've also deleted the ability to attach groups at user creation time. So you would, instead of attaching them at user creation time, you'd have to add the user and then go to the groups tab. And finally, I did not, when I made these screenshots, I did not touch the iRODS system role. So this kind of shows what it defaults to. So on the left, it defaulted to RODS admin, and now it's defaulting to RODS user. So we also updated a lot of dependencies. Um, so a couple big ones were that we updated the Docker image that's running Tomcat. So that it's now running Tomcat 9 and JDK 21. We also updated Spring dependencies and a couple more serverless API and logging was updated from SLF4J to Log4j. Okay, and we also did, here's a list of the bug fixes. Okay, so 133, that was an issue where people were getting a denial of service because users would log in and enter an invalid user, and that connection to iRODS was not being broken down when they got the error that it was an invalid user. So Jargon sends us back an invalid user exception in that case, so we just needed to make sure that we disconnected from iRODS in that case. So that should fix the denial of service problem. 189, there was a logic bug around CSV download when you're doing a metadata query search. And that was specific to when the search only returned data objects and no collections. What you'd see on the screen would be correct, but when you hit the CSV download, it would fail. Spring for shell vulnerability was remedied with the Spring version updates. 327 was just something that kind of goes away when we got rid of the Metalnx database, and it had to do with someone creating a user outside of Metalnx and then not showing up in Metalnx because again there were two different sources of truth before. I think it did eventually show up once the synchronization jobs ran, but it wasn't ideal. Another thing I noticed while I was doing this was that if I set Metalnx has its own default resource, um, so it's different from how iRODS determines where a file will go, what resource. Um, and if you happen to leave that default, uploads were failing. So now if that I'm sorry, if you left it blank, then the uploads were failing. Now that if you left that blank, we would just let iRODS determine where the resource should go by its own policy. And finally, there are some more issues that we're able to close just because of the removal of the Metalnx database. Okay, future work. There's still a little bit of dead code involving the Metalnx database out there, mostly like JavaScript routines that are never being called but are left out there. So we'll clean that up in the next release. Um, then the other big change is the we're moving away from jargon to iRODS 4J. And when we do that, we will have to rewrite or re-implement some of the code that to use iRODS 4J. There are still bugs out there that we need to fix, and we will consider leveraging the iRODS metadata to re-implement the features that we have removed in this release, such as templates, shared links, favorites, and user profiles. Um, and the idea is that this is something that's going to be happen in the future, probably not soon. But the idea is that any of these features you can disable if you want, because we don't want to force someone who's using Metalnx to populate the metadata in iRODS in ways that they may not want to. For example, people may have their own ways of storing first name and last name in the user metadata, and they may not want um, Metalnx to go in and do it again and have kind of duplicate data. So that would be, if we do implement this, that will be something you can disable. Okay, so that's all the slides. And so now I'll just do a little demo, and I'm going to share my entire desktop. Okay, and I'm going to go to Metalnx, and log in. Okay, so right now I'm logged in as a RODS user. I'll just select a file to upload, and I'll do a view information. So you'll see like the new permission model. And behind here, I have some windows open to iRODS. So let's go there first. And so ls-a, you see that RODS is the owner of that file. So again, we have the full 10 level permission model. So let me just change it to something, modify metadata. And so I'll go back and query iRODS again, and it'll say modify metadata. And you'll see that the setting is modify metadata. Okay. Now, normally for a regular user, once they modify metadata, once they set that to modify metadata, they no longer have permission to change the permissions. So they would no longer have a drop-down list here. Um, but because this is RODS and it's an admin user, Metalnx uses the admin flag, so it can always fix it back up. Okay, so I'll go and I'll add a user. Um, you'll see the new user form. And it defaults to RODS user. We need to clean this up a little bit, the layout. It still has room for the uh, the details that were deleted. Anyway, so we have now a new user, user one, And um, I I will hold off on that before I add a group. So I'll log out as rods and I'll log in as user one. Okay, so user one will add a file. And as you see on the left panel, there's only three links because this is a RODS user. Um, so I've added the file, and I'll look at permissions. Now I have ownership permission. So let's say I'll just add delete object permission. So if I refresh that, now I no longer have ability to change it. So um, it would take an admin to go back and give me ownership permission before I could change that. So I'll actually do that. Leave that file too. Forgot to use the admin flag. So now I have permission to change it again. Um, if it if I did change that, but also had permissions because of group, I had ownership permissions through a group for this file, I could change this to something other than own, and I would still have ability to update it because I have ownership through the group. Um, so let me log out, and I'll show you Metalnx connecting to 4.2. So now be connecting to my 4.2. And I've logged in as rods. Now this is a different iRODS instance, so I don't have any files on here. Um, I will select a file. I'll say file 3. And I have file 3, so I want to view the permissions. And now you see that you only have, because I'm in 4.2.12, I only have the 4-level permission model. So I'll change that to right, show you that the change happened. Now this screen right here is I'll maximize it. And you'll see that it did update to modify object, which is the same as the write permission. So that's kind of a demo of all the things that changed. I mean, there's some things you could just see on the screen. Yeah, that's it. So any questions?
Excellent. Thank you, Justin.
Sure.
So we've shown that it works against 4.2 and 4.3. The left sidebar obviously has less stuff in it.
Mhm.
I don't think we changed much about any of the actual browsing and uploads and downloads for this particular release, right? So
Right. I mean, the big change is the removal of the database. So if you, I mean, I don't really have to.
yeah, and there were a class of bugs that were due to the synchronization or lack of synchronization between the two systems. So
Yes. Yes.
we were able to close a lot of things just by no longer having two sources of truth, which is good.
Right. Yeah. If you see, like, there's a Metalnx Docker container, but there is before it would create its own
EV.
data, or yeah, database. So
That's right. Is there, let me think. I don't know that I have any other questions. Anybody else on the call?
I have a question.
Yes.
Um, Sorry if you said this, but what was there some connection between the Metalnx database and the adding of users to groups on creation? I was just curious what the reasoning was for removing that feature.
a connection between the database and
So one of the features that you said was removed was when you create a user, you used to be able to add them to a group right off the bat, right? And I was just curious why that was removed because I don't remember seeing that. I've been
I
watching all the
just
development
I think we
process.
got feedback that it was awkward, the way it worked and
Oh,
confusing.
interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
I think it was
Okay.
also that when you went to edit the groups, you got dropped back to the same page with the slightly different things that you could select. And so it was just, it didn't work consistently depending on which front door you came in. So it was just easier to not let that happen, was the answer.
Okay, that's fair. I'm not a I'm not an iRODS administrator, obviously, but I could see where that might be
Yeah,
kind of
it's
useful
also,
actually.
there's also no atomic way to do that from the iRods perspective. So
That's true.
you had to handle the case where a user put in a duplicate name, and then how do you convey that the first part failed versus the second part? So we just got rid of the problem.
I have one question.
Yes.
In past versions, we had performance issue during doing search to metadata. Is the issue you mentioned with the synchronization of the database, the Postgres database, could explain the issue we have?
I don't know that any metadata was stored in that database.
Okay.
I think that those types of interactions are still going to go to iRods and back again.
Okay.
So I don't think they'll be related. I'd be happy to talk about you with that. Talk with you about that. If you find that this should be easy enough to play around with and test. So we'd be happy to learn more.
Okay.
I expect that they are unrelated.
Also, since you mentioned performance, I don't have any hard numbers, but I haven't noticed any degradation from removing the Metalnx database. As I'm clicking around, specifically users and things like that. But yeah, so we could try to get better numbers on that. But so now everything is going to iRods, right?
Right. It is more of a pure client in that from that
Mhm.
perspective. So a metadata search will still do what it was doing probably before. But yeah, we'd be happy to talk with you about how we could optimize some things. It might be that the queries could be touched depending on what you're asking for. Yes,
Okay. Thank you.
of course. All right. Well, thank you, Justin. We're gonna
Thank you.
stop recording. Excellent work. Good job.